And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're talking about the running backs for the Washington Commanders. We're going to be talking about why they are going to be key for the Washington Commanders to have some success in this upcoming season. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, Jalen Lane, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's jump into it. We're talking about the Commanders running backs and why they're going to be huge for the success of this football team. And so we know that training camp is right around the corner. In fact, training camp is set to start here July the 23rd. And so we are just about 20 days out before we start talking about the training camp. And so I think that, look, each position on this football team is going to be important. Obviously, you need the entire football team to be clicking if you're talking about winning the Super Bowl. But I think one of the most important groups on this team is going to be the running backs. I think that the running backs are going to be extremely huge for the Washington Commanders. And so, look, dating myself a little bit here, when I think about this franchise and I think about the success that Washington traditionally had in the 80s and the 90s, they were able to run the football. When you start to think about the Hogs, you think about Joe Bugle, who coached them. You had also to Mark May, you had Russ Grimm, you have Jeff Bostic. And they were able to essentially move people out of the way, get these running backs in the space, and just let them eat up defenses that way and kind of wear them down. And so I think that with the Commanders, they're going to need to have a running game. I think that, for the passing game to be at an optimal level, and then also too for Jaden Daniels to take this next step, I think that the running game is going to be huge. And I really think that this could be a piece that the Washington Commanders might have to lean on, especially when you're looking to win the Super Bowl. And so I think that there's four key elements that you get with being able to run the football. And so I think the first thing that you have to look at here is you want to set the tone and the identity of the team to be able to go out and dominate the trenches. And so I know that the game is set up to put up a whole bunch of points and things like that, but I still think that you need to have a terrific running game, because when you do have a terrific running game, now you're talking about being able to just essentially line up, move the defense out the way, and now you get into point number two, where you can dominate in the time of possession. And also, two, you're bringing that first down marker closer to your offense. I think that the more that you can continue to grind on a defense with the ground game and make the first down marker that much shorter to get to, then you're talking about it's tougher for defenses now to really go out there and counteract that, because you're gashing them now on the ground, and you also can do numerous things in the passing game or whatnot. And so really that is key for the Washington Commanders. You want to be able to go out, dominate, really set the tone. You want to be able to get the time of possessions. You want to bring that first down marker close to you. And then next, when you're talking about opening up the passing game, which is the third point as to why this is important, now you're talking about defenses stacking boxes. They're bringing additional resources to stop the run, which means this. Now you're going to be able to go over the top to the wide receivers. And we've been talking about the wide receivers essentially all offseason. And so we know what Terry McLaurin can do. You add Deebo Samuel to that. Luke McCaffrey is a guy that I think is going to take a step forward here in year number two. Noah Brown, I think that he was going to have an even better season until he got injured. Hopefully he's going to be good coming into camp. And then Zach Ertz, year two with Jaden Daniels along with Noah Brown. And then you add essentially Jalen Lane, who is like Deebo Samuel, but just not quite the running back like Deebo Samuel, but with the speed and just being elusive in that screen game or whatnot. Like, look, this is a dynamic passing attack that you have. And so now if a defense is in a situation where they have to try to bring additional resources up to stop you, that's going to open it up for the wide receivers, and it should open it up for big time plays down the field with the play actions and things like that. And so next, I think the fourth thing here with the running backs and why they are going to be huge for the Washington Commanders in this offense is now you slow down the pass rush. One of the things that we've been talking about is the upgrades on the offensive line. And so how do you help out the offensive line? You're able to run the football because now, as defenses want to come all out with these blitzes and stuff like that, you can catch them napping on that kind of stuff. And I think now also too, when you're running the football good and effective throughout a game, they're going to have to think a little bit more before they start to come in here. And so that kind of slows down the pass rush. And now you get the defense just thinking they don't just pin back their ears and come after Jaden Daniels. And so those are the four key aspects that I see with this running game going into the season. Now, when we start to break it down from an individual standpoint, starting with Brian Robinson Jr., look, I think that for him, the biggest thing for him this year is, can he take a step forward as far as being available? I think that if Brian Robinson Jr. can stay healthy, he can definitely be impactful for the Washington Commanders. Now, is he going to be a guy that is just going to go out there and break it open for 80 yards and stuff like that? No, that's not necessarily his game. But he has the physical tools to go out there and wear down a defense and really start to eat you up that way. He can get some good gains. And I think for him, the more touches that he has, the better off he will be. But that really factors into Brian Robinson just being healthy, because when you look at this and you look at the production for him, the most carries that he's had in a season is 205. And so this last season, he had 187 carries and he had 799 yards. Now, where I'm encouraged with Brian Robinson is that his averages went up as far as what he got per carry there. So 4.3, and he had the 8 touchdowns. And so he had his most touchdowns and his averages went up. And so I think he needs to go up just slightly more. And I think that for him in a contract year, and I think that we've been talking about this in the mandatory mini camps and things like that, look, everybody's saying that he looks focused, he looks good and everything else. He's even talked about being healthy. And I think that that's going to be key for Brian Robinson Jr. is to stay healthy here. And so that is going to be the question moving into the season, and also to how he continues to look as a training camp rolls along. And so next, when we look at Austin Eckler, and I'm looking at what I'm looking at from him, I think that Austin Eckler, for me, this is the year where I think Austin Eckler can really be dangerous in the passing game. And so I think that he can definitely come in behind Brian Robinson Jr. And, you can depend on him to go ahead and take some carries and give the defense a different look. But I think this year is the year that I think Austin Eckler can really be very successful in the pass game. And I think that this is something where now when you have all those weapons on the outside with Debo, Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, Jalen Lane, Luke McCaffrey, like all the stuff that they can throw out there, I think that he's a guy that could slip underneath, these coverages and things like that. And I think that he could really benefit from that. And so I'd expect this year for him, I think he had 35 receptions last year. I think that those numbers go up as long as he's healthy. And I think that you're going to see him be a bit more impactful, I think, as a wide receiver this year out of the backfield. And I think that that is something where Austin Eckler can really excel. I think that he still can be on the special teams unit as well. But I think that that's really what I'm looking for from Austin Eckler. And so hopefully he can stay healthy. And I'm just looking forward to seeing him utilized maybe more as a wide receiver here in this offense. I think it will open it up for Jaden Daniels, especially if he can't get anything down the field, getting it to Austin Eckler in space. I think he's still good enough at this point in time in his career to make defenses pay. And then that leads me to the player that I think everybody is watching here going into training camp. And one of the more interesting stories, and it's Jacory Croskey-Merritt, because Jacory Croskey-Merritt, in my opinion, I think that here is a guy that he has all the tools to be RB1. He really does. And the question now, after missing, a year of the competitive football as far as playing in games, but we know that he practiced or whatnot, what is he going to look like when it gets down to games? Because right now, we've been hearing about it, we've been reading about it. He looks great getting in and out of his cuts and, just looking, pretty explosive, stuff like that. And so now, does it continue to translate as we put on the pads, as we start to get into contact, as he gets into preseason, which I'm sure he's probably going to get plenty of work. And I think that with Jacory Croskey-Merritt, he's already a player that I think you can plug into the special teams, which is why I think he gets on the field initially. But here's the thing. If RB1 and RB2 go down, I think that Jacory Croskey-Merritt really has a chance here to step into that role. And I think that with Austin Eckler and maybe him being more of a pass catching running back, that really opens the door up behind Brian Robinson Jr., even if he does stay healthy, because I think a change in pace back is going to be good to go along with Brian Robinson Jr. no matter what. So Jacory Croskey-Merritt, he might be that guy this year. And so that is what I'm looking for. And I think that if he does look like he's been looking in the mandatory camps here, this would be huge for the Washington Commanders. It would be a serious upgrade that nobody really factored in, because I think that, look, if you're a fantasy football player, just throwing that out there, I think that he's a guy that he could be a sleeper pick out there, because I think that there's a real chance that he could get an opportunity in year one. But let's see if he can secure, the roster spot and get a significant role in year one. But he's definitely the guy I think that a lot of people are looking for. And the next, when you look at the two running backs that contributed last season for us, and starting with Chris Rodriguez Jr. And so from the clips that I see, he looks great. And I think that he looks like he's in some terrific shape here. And so I think for Chris Rodriguez Jr., it's, can he come into camp and can he establish that he should be the guy that is behind Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr., because he's shown that he can definitely show up in games. I thought that last season, with the opportunities that he got, I thought that Chris Rodriguez Jr. was solid. He had 2 touchdowns, 35 carries, 173 yards. And I just love the fact that he stayed ready. And so I think that maybe Chris Rodriguez Jr. comes into camp. There's a chance that, look, he can definitely get a significant role here. We'll see how many running backs the Washington Commanders take into the season. But I think that that is the key for Chris Rodriguez Jr. It's going to be how well does he do, I think, in camp, and then also too in preseason. And the next, when you look at also too, Jeremy McNichols, here's a player that he definitely had some solid contributions here last season. You're looking at a player with 55 carries, 261 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And so he most certainly showed that he would show up in games and things like that. But, between those 3 running backs that I've just talked about with him, Chris Rodriguez Jr., and then also too, Jacory Croskey-Merritt, like, these guys are really going to be battling it out. And I think that that is what is going to be one of the more interesting battles here in this upcoming training camp and then into the preseason for the Washington Commanders. And I'll say this, just an added bonus here as to why the running backs are going to be huge for the Washington Commanders in 2025. Because when you look at it like this, as you get deeper into the season, you want to have your running game clicking at a high level, especially when you get into the postseason, because I feel like the game slows down. You got to think about the weather, the elements that you're going to face outside. It could be snowing, it could be windy, raining, whatever the case may be. That is going to impact the passing game. And so you want to be able to run the football. And so I know everybody looks at these quarterbacks that can go out and light up a defense for 4 or 5 touchdowns, things like that. And I get it. Jaden Daniels definitely has that ability to do so. But it is going to be important for the Washington Commanders. If they're going to take that next step as a team, they're going to have to run the football. And so we need this team to be able to run it for the entire year. We saw how good the team kind of started to roll, and then it kind of fell off with the injuries and things like that. And so hopefully they can sustain that throughout the year. But I think that that is going to be super impactful for this team and what they want to do offensively, being dynamic, keeping defenses off balance, keeping defenses from just simply coming after Jaden Daniels and things like that, because the more things that you can do offensively, the better off you are. We talked about this a couple videos ago with Dan Quinn. He's already factoring in the fact that they may not necessarily just be able to run out there and do the no huddle stuff. Like, they're going to have to be able to account for different schemes and stuff like that. And so one of the key things that you need to do is you need to keep that defense honest that you're going against. That means running the football. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking as far as the running backs heading into training camp. Is this maybe one of your bigger positions that you're thinking like, yes, they definitely need to step it up here for the Washington Commanders to take that next step and hopefully get a Super Bowl back to Washington? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And look, as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.